Welcome to the Social Mission Revolution.
Each week we explore some of the greatest undertold stories of businesses and everyday people who are making their ultimate impact on the world through social mission. This is Social Mission Revolution,
And this is your host, Andrea Putting. Today I'm here with Tina Murray, and I'm looking forward to talking to Tina about some really interesting topics that we don't usually talk about too much in our society. So I'd like to introduce you this evening to Tina. How are you today, Tina?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Andrea.
It's wonderful to have you. And so tell me a little bit about who Tina Murray is and what you're up to.
I'm increasingly being called Toilet Tina.
Lovely.
Which I take as a compliment because I'm passionate about toilets. I went to Ghana a number of years ago working with an NGO that rescued children from slavery, and while I was there I met some local people and went back a number of times since, and so I've really become a bit more immersed in what really happens for people in Ghana. But it's not just Ghana where people don't have toilets, and it affects so many levels of society, education, etc. It's throughout the world. So in the world, 892 million people practice open defecation still.
Oh, wow. That's massive.
Big.
You would never have thought of that, would you?
No.
It's something we so take for granted.
Absolutely. And that's the thing I've found as I go out and speak about it more, the surprise for people that it is such a big problem and that it's a difficult thing to fix very quickly. Governments are trying, but it's a long way behind where the global sustainable goals are at the moment.
So what really got you interested in toilets?
Well, I come from a family of educators. My parents met teaching in the Northern Territory more than 50 odd years ago. And so I just always knew I was going to have an education. And when I went to Ghana, the first time I was there, I met a lovely guy called Fred Kennedy, who was working on the beach there, selling bracelets to tourists for $2.
Yep.
And that was because at the age of 14, his parents had divorced and his mum couldn't afford to keep him in school any longer. So as a boy in the family, he went out to take care of his mum and his two sisters. And when I met Fred, he understood that not having an education had made a real difference to what opportunities he had, where he was in his life and where he could probably go. Yeah. And so that really hit me because, as I said, came from a family of educators. I always knew I was going to go to university. Didn't even think twice about it. And it was just something I took for granted. And hearing that story and many others like it really made me want to make a difference in education to start with. But as I went back to Ghana a number of times and met an NGO there that was working with some local schools, I was running some events in Melbourne, and what I started doing was asking people for $5 each time, which I'd put aside to educate a child in Ghana because it only costs $100 to educate a child there for a year.
Wow.
So I thought, not at all. I thought I'll collect $5 from 20 people, won't hurt most people. Most people are happy to do it. And, that's one child educated for a year. As part of that, I started speaking to the schools which this NGO was working with, and I asked them what were their pressing needs, because you put them in a list of order of what it is you wanted and how much around about it would cost. And the first thing on the list I got from both schools was water. So one school had one tap, which was intermittent, and it was for 540 children to share. And so they were asking for a water tank to back that up. The other school, which had over 300 children, had no water at all.
Yeah.
And so it just hit me, wow. Number 2 on their list, neither school had toilets and were both being threatened with being shut down.
Yeah, so the schools were threatened to be shut down because there was no water or toilets, is that right?
Mainly because of the no toilets, because of the health risks of the open defecation. It's a sanitary thing. So, yeah, they were getting threatened with being shut down.
Yeah, so it really makes you realise how important that is for the education. So because you became passionate about education, then you realise that without the water and without the toilets, there's no education.
Absolutely. And in Ghana, about 3,000 children die each year from diarrhoea. About 19,000 people get diarrhoea and die each year in Ghana just from practices like open defecation and not having good quality water. So, and cholera, which is a disease in the Western world we hardly ever see. And 249 people died of that in 2014, and there were 22,000 cases of it. So big problems just from something as simple as not having a bathroom.
Yeah. And it's not a sexy topic at all. I just had this flashback of my son when he was a teenager, and they had these ribbons for everything. There was pink ribbons and yellow ribbons, and for all these different diseases, which could really, in comparison, are sexy. And he made the point that there needs to be a brown ribbon because more people die in the world from the kind of thing that you're talking about than ever die of breast cancer or any of these other things. Not to put down those things, but the reality was that these weren't sexy. They weren't being funded by big pharmaceutical companies. They're things that are kind of locked away.
So how old was your son? I love that. I'm going to do the brown ribbon.
Yeah, I don't know. He was at high school though. He would have been 15 or 16 at the time. He's now 34. I probably just really embarrassed him, but
I'm sure he still knows the problem. But what I found too is there's a much bigger impact. So especially for girls in countries which don't have toilets at schools, often the girls when they're menstruating won't go to school during the week that they're menstruating. So if you just look at a typical girl's body and how often they menstruate, it's 1 week of every month. So it means they're missing a quarter of their education potentially, and the impact of that month after month of missing a week of your schooling just because there's nowhere to change means that often the girls, definitely in Ghana, the dropout rate for girls is really high because they get so far behind in their education.
Yeah, so once they start menstruating, so somewhere between 12 and 14, they're going to drop out of school for that.
It's much higher just because of that. But then the thing, as I started talking more and more to the schools, there's more and more depth to that. Is even the women in Ghana that I spoke to were amazing. They were so open and really helped me to understand what it was like to be a young woman living in Ghana. And they were great about telling me about how it was. And so I asked them some questions. I felt comfortable enough to ask them some questions you would never normally ask people, but they understood. The more I understood, the more that I could help. And so I asked a couple of the teachers about what they do when they need to change. And the two teachers I spoke to both travelled for 20 minutes to go to the closest toilet. One took a taxi, so it cost her money every time she went to the bathroom, and the other one walked. But while they were away from their classroom, they had 30 students or however many are in the class, didn't have a teacher teaching them. So just the impact of a female teacher not being in the class means the whole class is affected for that period of time while the teachers are out of the school.
Yeah, it's just mind-blowing really, isn't it, when you start thinking about how other people live. And this is really, I'm just trying to think of percentages of the world. It's a massive percentage of the world don't have those things that we take for granted every day.
I've become very close with Mark Bella, who's done a great TED talk on the work he does in India. If anyone feels like having a look, I've forgotten what it's called, but if you do Mark Bella toilets, it'll come up. And he and his Rotary Club have been doing this same work in India, and they found as they started putting toilets into schools in India that the influx of girls from other schools that didn't have toilets was huge. So it meant that all of these schools just suddenly expanded just because these girls and their parents wanted them to have an education, but they hadn't had the opportunity. So having the toilets made such a difference.
Yeah, wow. It just blows my mind to think of something that's just so simple.
Well, the thing that they found too, which I find fascinating, and it really shocked them, like obviously when they're building the toilets, we're always looking for future growth and we're looking for longevity of the toilet standings. So they'd built for extras, to be sure. But what they found once they'd built these toilets too is the boys started complaining because the girls were drinking all of their water. Because beforehand the girls weren't drinking water because they didn't want to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So imagine what that does to your body, being dehydrated in a place like India where it's hot and humid. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, you often think about that. You see them in Africa with not being able to get the amount of water that we take for granted, that we're told you need to drink 2 litres of water a day, and they'd be lucky to have that much.
That's true. And it's usually the women, traditionally in Ghana at least, and in a lot of parts of the world, it is traditionally the women who are collecting the water. So if you think about some of these girls who have to go to school, they go in the morning, collect water, drop that at home for the family, and then they go to school, and then they might go home and collect another bunch of water. So if you think about the amount of time that's coming just to do what they need to do to help their family out, that again is impacting their education because they mightn't necessarily be doing their homework, they're helping out around the house. And I remember visiting one place where it's Larabunga, which is this village up in the north there and very remote. And the girls go down to the river, as a group to go and collect their water for their families, and there's crocodiles in the river.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It gets better. It gets better. Oh, dear. Oh, yeah, it's hardly a laughing matter, but it's just, it seems so ridiculous to us.
It's so foreign from what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it just puts a new light on living in a lucky country, doesn't it? No matter what we complain about, even when we complain about drought, which we have frequently, it's nothing in comparison. We can still get sufficient water to drink and to flush our toilets and shower, and it's it's a lot to take in with that.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing that I've found, because now that I'm speaking about this, and especially when people hear about the impact on girls for the first time, most people are taken aback because, as you said, it's not something that we even would consider. Not having toilets, we think of from a health point of view, but we don't understand, because we haven't been exposed to it, how that can affect ongoing education and people's opportunities. And the theme of one of the talks that I do is, to make a difference, you have to make a start. And what that came from was when I was in this village, Larabunga, where the girls were collecting water with crocodiles in the stream. I had dinner with the village elder there one night, and he said to me how he chooses to educate the girls in his village because he believes women will always educate their children.
Yep.
Men may marry someone else and leave their children, and like what happened to my mate Fred that I was telling you about at the beginning, they have to drop out of school to take care of their family. So this village's elder's idea was, if I look after the women, they will educate their children, and in time my whole village will be full of educated people. And what hit me with that night was, you only have to educate one person and you've made a difference which is going to last for generations. So when we talk about being overwhelmed in whatever it is we do, and how big a problem might be, no matter what it is, all we have to do is make a start, because that start is going to make a difference, and beyond probably what we could ever imagine.
Yeah, it often is that way, is that if you can make that difference in one person's life, then they make a difference in two people's lives. And it just,
Mm.
it goes on for generations. I thought about that a while ago, and how someone who had influence on my life, and then from that, their influence affected the way that I brought up my children, and then the
Mhm.
way that they are in the community, in their workplaces. And now I have a grandchild, so how he's going to be affected by this person that I knew when I was growing up, who taught me about environmental issues and being concerned about other people. So
Wow.
that you start to think about that and how we can influence other people.
Mm.
If we can just influence one, just don't get
Yeah.
overwhelmed with it. It's a good message.
Yeah. And it's hard not to, because it is a product.
A massive,
We can't fix all the problems, but
no.
if we work on one, and we work on one we're passionate about, how amazing would that be? If I got criticised by some people a while ago. It's like, well, why are you doing work in Ghana when there's so many people in Australia who need help?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, valid point. That's
Yeah.
fine for them to have that opinion. But my response to that is, well, if everyone did their bit that they're passionate about, how different would the world be? So I don't have to be doing a particular thing. As long as I'm doing the thing that I'm really passionate about and connects with me and I feel called to do, I'm making a difference there now. Someone else go and do something they feel passionate about and make a difference there. And how amazing would the world be if we all did something?
It is. And really that's what the social mission revolution is all about, is people finding that one thing that speaks to them, that calls, not my microphone, calls out to them, where they can make a difference. And one of the things I love about what you do is that it's not within your sphere of knowledge. You don't, it's what I call beyond the why. You have in your life, there's never been a situation where you haven't had that experience.
For sure.
But it's something that's called you to be deeply involved in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think sometimes they're the things that we can be most passionate about.
Yeah. And that's what I often find when I do my speeches. The overwhelming thing I get from most people, on top of other stuff, is, you're so passionate. And I just think I'm talking, but obviously my passion's coming through without me even trying. So, it's easy to keep going when you really believe in what you're doing.
Yeah. And how do you think that affects just the rest of your life, like your work life as well? How does that affect, having that passion, how does that affect what you do on a daily basis?
I think it puts things in perspective. I mean, with the background that I've had anyway, I'm pretty good about focusing on my values and what's important to me. But I think it really does give you a perspective about what's important in life. And in the last year, I've moved state. Everything's changed in my life. Not one thing's the same apart from my car. And that's all been, a great experience. But a big part of my starting in this new other part of the country is I bought another house, and I thought about, okay, well, what do I want this house to be? And so I really looked at what I'm doing environmentally in it. What sort of cleaning products am I using? Do I need stuff? I haven't bought clothes, I don't think, in over a year. Like, I'm just really conscious of, again, what impact, even though it's just one person, what impact is my stuff making on the world? So I think that to me is, again, it comes back to that thing about the one thing that I can do. I don't have to go, it's too big. My not composting my stuff isn't going to make a difference, but it makes a bit of a difference. So if everyone does a little bit, it adds up, and it's a bit less stuff in landfill. It's also made me very aware of people's prejudices and how that can affect whether people get on board or not. And again, people people have their rights to think what it is, but it really fascinates me, human nature, and how our own personal judgment can make such a difference to what our behaviour ends up being. So it might mean that we block things just because we've got our own blocks and we don't see what else we could learn from the situation. Even if we don't get the full situation, there might be something else we could learn about ourselves through it.
Yeah. And often that is about ourselves, isn't it?
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah. And I got asked the other day, do I feel guilty about when I go to the toilet? Do I sit on the toilet and feel guilty about it? And I don't, because, you know, I was lucky enough to be born in Australia. It's normal for us to have toilets. I don't feel guilty about that at all, but there's an opportunity for me to make a difference. So,
but every time you go, it gives you, it reminds you that, hey, I've got a toilet and there's millions out there who don't. And
yeah,
and I would think that would add a little bit more inspiration for you.
Well, I do use Who Gives a Crap toilet paper because, you know, they're working in the realm that I'm passionate about, and so I'm very conscious of where I put my money and where that might go to as well.
Yeah, it's all those little things that make the big difference in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you found with the people you've spoken to are the biggest drivers for people who want to make a difference, do you think?
I think that I really think that it's something inbuilt within us, each of us, that we all have this inbuilt thing to make a difference somehow. And I actually find that when I dig into people, that they're all searching for this something.
Okay. Yep,
what they can do. So, and people go from one thing to another trying to find that something, but it's not until they reach into beyond the why and find that something that they're passionate about, which is a question that I ask people is what would you, it's one thing in the world that you would fight for, what is it? And I find that helps people to think about.
Okay.
What is it that's most important to them? Sometimes they're weird, just strange things come up, and so but generally speaking, I just think that it's something that everyone wants to do, and until they find it, they don't feel like they're living their life on purpose.
Well, it's part of our human nature to want to contribute. That's one of our human needs, to be able to do that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so the passions are all different things and come from all different places and all sorts of weird and wonderful things.
But isn't that the beauty of it? Because if everyone, as we said before, if everyone's got that passion and they do something about it, how amazing it would be.
Yeah. And I love hearing the stories because they all are all so different and they're all filled with so much passion that it just helps, which helps people to see that, you know, maybe, okay, just keep my eyes and ears open and there'll be something that speaks to me that where I can make my difference.
Yeah. I think it's funny too how I can look back on certain things in my life, and this Ghana starting out was exactly one of those where I fell into it. So I'd had a childhood dream of going to Antarctica, never thought I'd go there, but it was something I was really driven to do, and I thought, that's one bucket list item I'll never get to do. Yeah. But I did manage to go there. And then while I was on the ship in Antarctica, I shared a cabin with a girl who had a dream to go to every continent before she turned 30. And I'd never ever thought about that. But after I spoke to her, I thought, well, I've actually been to 6 of the 7 continents. The only one I haven't been to is Africa. So I came away from Antarctica going, okay, well, I want to go to Africa now. I might as well do all 7. I'm that close. And I knew a girl who, at the age of 25, she and her mates had started a charity called YGAP. Elle Critchley, Elliot Costello, who's Tim Costello of World Vision's son, and Albie Tomasi had started YGAP, and they were doing work in Africa. So I said to Elle, well, you're doing work in Africa. I'd love to have my travels mean something. So I'd like to do some charity work. I'd love to do it with YGAP. Which of your projects do you think I'd like? And it was she who said, oh, I think you'd love Ghana. So really the only reason I went to Ghana is because I went to Africa, met this girl Amanda who had this dream. I'm like, oh, I can do that. And because Elle suggested that, and, you know, then I got to know the people and just fell in love with the country. So it was really a bizarre way to get there. Never have thought of going, but I landed there, and how it changed my life.
Yeah. It's just amazing how we find ourselves in these positions and things open up, and next thing you know, you're the toilet lady.
And I'm happy to be.
Someone has to be. So if you had some advice for people who were searching for their social mission, what would it be?
I think one thing, like my story, where I said it didn't happen until I was in my 40s, this charity side didn't happen, and it's happened almost by accident. So to be patient, don't, just because you're looking for something now, maybe now's not the time, and it'll come. And as you just said, things fall into place. When you're on the right track, I find that things just fall into place. But I think coming back to what you said, I'm very much in tune with, you need to know your values. So you do need to know yourself from the inside out and know what really drives you. And I can say why this suits me because I know my values really well and I know what's really important to me. So it's easy for me to be able to focus on the toilets and water because it's about education, because there's so many other things I could be doing, but I don't need to because I know how much this aligns with who I am as a person. So I think while you're waiting to find what that is, get to know yourself and really align that, and just you'll see stuff will start to open up and you'll get a much better idea of where you want to spend your time and who with.
Yes, and that goes along with a lot of what I would teach people about understanding who they are, their values, their stories, their passions, the things that they would fight for. You put all those together, when you've got all those and you know what you're capable of yourself, then that something's going to pop out of somewhere. You're going to have that thing that comes from the future that calls you.
Well, you know, the thing I realised when I was doing my podcasts with every single person that I spoke to, and I was speaking to them about, you know, their things that they were passionate about, whatever that was, it always, every single one of them who were very entrenched in what they were doing, or every single one of them, their past experience, even the traumatic ones, were the ones that led them to where they are now, where they are the expert in their field or making a difference in their field. And so embracing every experience we have, even the really tough ones, and owning that and what it's brought for us is often how we're going to find what we're put here to do. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's a really good thing for us to think about and to look at, and probably a good place for us to close off.
Thank you. I've enjoyed speaking with you. It's been lovely. Thank you for the time.
Well, thank you for giving me your time. And would you like to just plug your toilets?
Oh, for sure. The money we're raising now is being done through the Rotary Club of Kidman Park, because Rotary, as an international organisation, we work with Rotary clubs in Ghana to be building these toilets. And so any donations are more than warmly welcome. So because it all does make a difference, and basically every penny does go to on the ground. So I'm more than happy to send you through the details if you like, Andrew, and if people want to donate, they're more than welcome. That'd be lovely.
Yep, I'll put a link with the podcast, and hopefully that'll capture someone's attention who's who can see the value in toilets to help people have a better education.
Yeah.
Fascinating story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Tina.
Pleasure.
This has been the Social Mission Revolution with Andrea Putting. Join me again next week when we'll speak to another social mission revolutionist who will inspire you on your journey to making your ultimate impact on the world.